Today we're going to go over splinting. As y'all know, that's pretty much, we run a bunch of trauma calls here. And we'll do a good bit of arm slants and long spine board and technical rescues. We're going to, splinting is first defined as the process of immobilizing or restraining or supporting a body part. That way, it's basically saying if somebody breaks our arm, we splint above and below the fracture to stabilize it. The objectives for this is going to be able to recognize which splints are needed for which injuries, and to know what we should check before and after immobilization. And we should have the capability of placing each splint on the appropriate injury correctly, and we will practice that at the end of this. The types of splints we have here is C-collars, we have the long spine board, the KD, the hair traction, the SAM splint, and the reef sleeve. We also have some soft splints also that we'll go over in this. What, as a responder, when we get on scene and notice a bone growth, some of the things we should check is what body part is it? Is it the humerus? Is it the tib fib area in the leg? Is it the lower arm that's broke? What body part is it? And do they still have a pulse below the fracture? That's very important to know. Another important thing is, can they feel it, and can they move below the fracture? Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. C-collars is probably one of the most common splints that we use. It's used to stabilize the neck, the cervical area, and keep everything in an inline neutral position for the spine. C-collars come in different sizes, all the way from a pediatric like Riley to somebody like me or Scott. And there are several different ways to measure it, but you apply it front to back. To measure a C-collar, you achieve a lateral view of their neck, and you make like the salute sign with your hand, and you measure basically from the collarbone, from the shoulder up, and then you go over to the C-collar, and we'll practice doing this when we do that, do the hands on, and you want the fingers to be that as wide as the collar is. If you need to adjust it, you can. Most of the C-collars we've got now are adjustable from no neck all the way to tall. We do have some pediatric adjustable collars, but as we know, most of our patients are adults. And if the C-collar doesn't fit, we can always use towel rolls as a backup. And the long spine board is used to mobilize the back, and it's also used as a universal splint. But if we got time, we need to splint the injury where it's located, not just put them on the backboard. The spine board helps reduce movement and prevent further injury for the patient. There are several ways that we can place somebody on the backboard. If they are laying on the ground, we can log roll them with a person that's holding C-spine at the head, counting to 3, and rolling to one side, and then back on that. If they do not line up straight on the backboard, we can do like a Z-drag. Again, the person at the head has 4 control and 4 count of when the patient is moved, and you move them at one time. We can also apply it by removing somebody from a car. If they interact, the person on the seat holding the neck is still in charge of how the patient gets moved outside the car. And we lay them flat and then secure them and move them as one unit. And if we get there and they're complaining of back pain upon palpation and standing up, we can do a takedown, a standing takedown on the spine board, where basically the person holding the neck reaches around the board, and two people get under, one person under each arm, and as the person at the head counts, you just, the people under the shoulders ease the board down. We'll practice that here in a little bit also to get some hands-on time with that. One of the other splints that we have is KD. Now this is not one that we use commonly, but if we have a vehicle accident with entrapment, or even when I was doing this, I found out they have created a way to use it as a hip splint. But this was designed originally to be an extrication device where if somebody's trapped in a car, you can slide it down behind their back and place it, and then move. It's got, as you can tell, 3 straps for the abdominal area that you secure, and then 2 grommet straps. These 2 right here, they go up underneath and in between their legs. And once you get them out of the car, you release those straps. And to use a KD, it takes at least 2 minimum trained personnel to use it because of the techniques and everything that's required in hand. Now this can be very beneficial to somebody that has the hairline retraction splint is very beneficial to somebody that has a midline femur fracture. If they do, holding general traction and applying mechanical traction when you place them on this creates stability in the leg and also can relieve pain. The first thing you want to do when you use this is put the all in front of the ankle hitch. That basically just goes around their foot, and you place it in there, and you pour traction till the fractured leg matches the unfractured, injured leg. There are several ways to measure this for the patient. You use the opposite leg, that's the uninjured, and measure from the growing area past the foot, and it's got 2 self-locking locks on it that you can adjust out to whatever length that you need it to be for the patient. And they do come in a child size and an adult size. And after you measure it and you get everything secure, you have 2 straps above the knee and 2 straps below the knee to secure it. And then you have a growing strap also that is hold it. Now with hair traction, most of the times the hospitals around here want you to go ahead and place them on a long spine board also for precautionary measures and easier movement of the leg. We also carry SAM splints, which come packaged, folded up. If y'all want to pass it around and look at it. They come folded up. You can unfold them and cut them to the size you need. And then form them around the injured arm or the injured area that you're trying to splint. And it becomes rigid because it's got like aluminum in it that makes it rigid. And now the reef sleeve is also like the backboard. It's a full body splint. we'll mostly use the reed sleeve out here for your technical rescues, your low angle, or your even high angle rescues. We use it in coordination with the backboard. It has built-in hooks to help move the patient from where they got injured to the ambulance or helicopter, whichever one they need. And with any of these splints, one thing we want to do is we make sure we check for pulse, motor, and sensation before and after any movement or immobilization. Has anybody got any questions so far?
What if both their legs are broke? The same, and both their legs are shorter. How do you measure that?
I would personally just put them on the long spine board, as long as they got good pulse and motor sensation, that you have nothing to really go by. And also with a hair traction, if you have suspicion of a pelvis fracture, it's a contraindication for the hair traction splint. So just be mindful of that. If you go to push on the hips and they scream in pain, even though they got a midline femur fracture, don't use the hair traction because it can cause further injury than what we want to achieve. And with all these splints, we have additional equipment that we may use with it. And some of those are spider straps that we'll use to secure to the backboard for all spinal injuries. Duct tape. Originally, duct tape was carried on most all ambulances to secure patients to the backboard, and even limb mobilization it was used for. 9-foot scraps, if you use that to secure a patient to the backboard, you use 3 of them. One below the knees, one at the hips, and one under the armpits. You can use more, but 3 is the minimum you want to use. And we'll also use tape to secure the splints, like to the long arm. Like if we use this soft 18-inch splint right here, we can tape to keep it, or use Corlex. That's the next thing to keep it in place. And with this, as you notice, we're splinting above and below the fracture if it's a radial ulnar fracture. And these are another type of splint that we do carry. Head blocks is something else that you'll use a good bit. Now we carry 2 types here. I prefer these because these with the Velcro sometimes don't stay on if it's raining, or if the patient's large. It's easier just to slide this and roll these out and place them on like that. Another thing we have is individual splints. This is a leg splint that if somebody has a tib fib or a broken ankle, we can place a foot in this and secure it like that, and secure it. And with this, just remember, like always, check for pulse, motor, and sensation before and after splinting, always. Because if we don't do that, and we get to the hospital and say, well, they had a pulse before we put them on the spine board in their feet, but now they don't, we just caused an injury. We just created more of a problem than we knew about. So we need to be very observant of that and make sure they can move their toes, move their arms. Can you feel this? And one of the other pieces of equipment that we may use in coordination with the reed sleeve, or if they own the roof, is a soaps basket. I didn't bring it in today, but most of us know where the soaps basket is located. It's on the ERT2. And basically all you do is once you get the patient secured to the long spine board, you place the long spine board into the Stokes basket, and with rope, webbing, you can lower or move the Stokes basket with the patient in it, and it also keeps, if you use rope, it keeps the Stokes basket from being jarred, which on another day we'll go over some technical rescue with the Stokes basket and setting up ropes and stuff. Now we're going to go over which splint will work the best for what injury. I've went through online and found 5 or 6 different pictures of broken bones or scenes of calls. And I just want y'all's input to tell me what y'all think will work the best in immobilizing the patient. Say we get a call to Hall 52 for a patient that was driving a forklift and he hit another guy, and this is the guy's arm, and he has good pulse motor sensation when you feel, good regular pulses, good capillary feel, he can squeeze his hands. What splints would you be apt to use for this?
Use a Sam splint.
Mm-hmm.
Sam splint is one option.
Use a soft splint.
Would you use this?
That's what I do.
This? And you would place it above and below. And a lot of times what you also do
It's a wrap above and
is
below.
to keep the hand, you put a bowl of correlates in it, and then you just secure that. What do you want to do after, say we secure this, what's the 3 things you want to check before that?
Follow motor sensor.
Okay, say you move the patient to the truck, and for some reason the patient decides to lay their arm down at a different angle. What would you check pulse motor sensation again? And it is very important, like I said, to document the findings every time you do that. This next one, I couldn't really find one to suit what I wanted, but this is a lady that was in an MVA rear-end collision. Her only complaint is a neck pain. She's it. So what's one of the first things y'all want to do?
Well, if she's not out. What'd you say? Go ahead.
Hold C-spine, okay. What's a splint
Katie.
that we can use? C-collar. How would we go about measuring it? Fingers.
3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know a bunch of people think no neck fits everybody, but doesn't. No. You do have some people that has no neck at all. And they ain't gonna get nothing but towels, and what you do then, you take a towel and you roll it up like this, one on each side, or you can make a horseshoe out of the towel if it's big enough, and you use tape to secure their head if you put it on the long spine board. Well, with new protocols and everything that Spartanburg EMS and Greenwood EMS has went to, if the patient's only got neck pain, we can put the C-collar on, and as long as their neck stays in an inline neutral position, we get the stretcher as close as we can, and we have the patient stand up and sit. Not backboarding doesn't mean that we say, okay, we put a C-collar on and walk you to the ambulance. No. You bring the stretcher as close to the patient as you can get it possible and let them move to it. And on that, you set the stretcher in Fowler's position, which is straight up, to keep their back up, and you can transport to the hospital like that. And again, what's the 3 things you want to check no matter what when you, before and after you splint and during transport.
PMIs.
Yep. PMS or pulse motor sensation. Now, some females, if you got a female patient and they don't know what you're talking about, and they say and you say PMS, they may think something opposite, but if they do, just explain to them, I'm just checking to make sure you can still feel and see how good pulse is and can move all your extremities. Now, the next one is a head-on collision. As y'all can tell, it's got airbag deployment. So, what would y'all do if the patient was in the driver's seat of this car? Okay, what else besides the KD would you use?
Come on.
Backboard.
We'd use spider straps too, correct? Or 9-foots, or whichever way we got to secure them to the backboard. Okay, say if it's the same wreck and they got a tib fib fracture, would you want to splint the tib fib fracture along with putting them on the spine board? So what would you use to splint the leg, essentially?
That one's split right there.
Not use one of the soft splits. Now we do take the larger padded splints that we could use for leg. Now if it's, say if it's mid-lower leg, what's the two bones, what's the two areas or joints that we want to bandage to?
Yep.
Right, ankle and knee. And that's to keep that injured site from moving. And then again, check PMS, pulse motor sensation. That's a very big thing when it comes to splinting. And with splinting is to prevent further injury and creating harm. This one, as y'all can tell, it's a compound femur fracture in the middle. It's not at the fall of the femur, it's in the middle. Say this was a kid riding an ATV around some work sites and he flipped it. And you got obvious deformity and swelling right here in the mid-thigh area. What would you want to do?
Drag.
Okay. Would you consider holding manual traction first with the leg to keep it still?
Mobilized.
And how would you measure the traction splint
The other way.
on the injured leg? Would you place this patient on the backboard? With that being said, would you take this and fold this down and put the patient like that?
No.
Or would you leave this up?
Up.
Up. And if sometimes with these injuries, it can be fun getting them into the ambulance. Sometimes you may have to think out of the box. If it's somebody that's above 6 foot tall,
Mm-hmm.
y'all seen the ambulances, they ain't but 5 or 6 inches usually on the bottom of the stretcher to the door. Well, you may have to turn the backboard around backwards to load them to keep the leg from getting injured. Now this scenario coming up is a car that was in the wrong place at the wrong time and a landslide happened. And your driver is in the car complaining neck, back, and hip pain. What would you want to do? Gonna need a soaks basket, gonna need the backboard,
C-spine.
Gonna need a C-spine, C-collar.
You could use a KD, but
Basically,
A little bit of everything.
everything, every splint you got, you want to use at least one of them. Except maybe an arm splinter, because he ain't got no broken arm, or she ain't got no broken arms. And this would be, like we said, a good call for the Stokes basket where, yes, the helicopter would probably be called to this depending on how far away from the hospital it was and how long it took us to get them out for long extrication.
I want to put them in a reef sleeve, get them out.
Oh, yeah. And the good thing about a reef sleeve is it does what? It splints the whole body.
And they totally encapsulate.
You're like a mummy when you go in it. The only thing showing is basically your head and neck. And that's for airway. And in summary, we should know, you know, if it's an arm fracture, we can use the padded splint. We can use a soft splint for an arm. Say, one thing we did not go over, say if it's a humerus fracture or a shoulder fracture, how can we stabilize this?
Triangle bandage.
Okay, triangular bandage of how?
Some as well.
Correct, we can take triangle bandage and make a little knot in one end of it. Gabby, if you would. Say this arm is broke, we can take this, come around. And just tie this around her neck. Now if it's a female, make sure you don't pull their hair. And if it's uncomfortable and you tie it too tight, you can put a 4x4 or something in it. And you want to check for pulse. Can you feel this? Can you read your fingers? Now, would you leave it just like this or would you do something else?
secure it to the body.
Tie it to the body.
Correct. And this is something very simple that most people forget to do. You can just take this and wrap it around their side and then just tie it up where the arms kept in position of comfort is what you're looking for. Where, because a lot of times with a shoulder fracture or something, if you just get it in position of comfort, the patient's happy. So say after all that, what you still want to check what? Right, PMS, pulse motor sensation. Also want to realize that, you know, sometimes you may be somewhere and on the last call you use this splint. You may have to adapt and use another type of splint to splint the injury. Does anybody have any questions so far? Anything? Like I said, the most important thing to this is making sure that we prevent further injury and splint the injury site, no matter if it's the arm, neck, chest, legs, being the femur or the tib fib, or even the ankle fracture. I mean, how often do we run a call where the patient steps off a curb and twists their ankle and it may pop out? Dislocated ankle. We need to know how to splint that to help reduce the pain. And with most splints, if it's an extremity, we can put ice on it and keep it in position of comfort. I want to thank y'all for coming and doing this session today. I would ask that we take time and practice putting on splints different ways. Josh?